While buying a jewel for his wife, the millionaire was left paralyzed when he saw the saleswoman's pendant, the same one he gave to his daughter before she disappeared 18 years ago. Michael Reynolds stood in the doorway of a room he hadn't entered in years. Dust lingered in the air as sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains, casting a soft glow on the faded wallpaper. It was Emily's room, untouched since the day she disappeared. Her favorite stuffed animal sat in a neat row on the bed, and a picture of her smiling face, framed in silver, rested on the nightstand. She had been 7, innocent, full of life. Michael's chest tightened. He had tried so hard to keep it all together, to live through the crushing pain that came with each passing year. But the truth was that part of him had died the day she was taken. He could still hear her laughter, the sound of her little feet running through the house. Now there was nothing but silence, a deep, heavy silence that filled every corner of the mansion. Elizabeth would have known what to do. His first wife had always been the strong one, the glue that kept their world from falling apart. But she was gone too, lost in childbirth when Emily came into the world. The irony of it all, Elizabeth had given her life to bring Emily into this world, and then the world had cruelly taken Emily away. He walked further into the room, running his fingers over the dusty dresser. Emily's school books were still stacked neatly, as if she might come back any day to finish her homework. It was a foolish hope, but it was one he couldn't let go of. For years, Michael had held on to the belief that Emily was out there somewhere, alive, waiting to be found. He had spared no expense in the search, private investigators, countless appeals to the public, even working with law enforcement, but the trail had gone cold, leaving him with nothing but a faint glimmer of hope and a heart full of regret. After Elizabeth's death, Michael had thrown himself into work, building his empire, making deals, expanding his wealth. It was a way to numb the pain, to distract himself from the gaping hole in his life. And then Samantha had come along. She was beautiful, kind, and full of charm. For a while, she had made him feel alive again. When they got married, he had thought it was a chance to start over, to create a new family. But the happiness was short-lived. Even with Samantha in his life, there had always been a shadow that loomed over them, the unanswered question of where Emily was and why they couldn't find her. Samantha had tried to comfort him in the early years, but over time, it became clear that the search for Emily weighed on their relationship. Samantha grew distant, and Michael felt the gap between them widening with every failed lead, every dead end. He turned his back to the room, walking out slowly, as if closing the door on the past. He couldn't keep living like this. He had to move on somehow. But every time he thought about giving up the search, something pulled him back. Today was Samantha's birthday, and he had promised to take her shopping, a small distraction from the endless grief that surrounded them. They were headed to New York, and while Michael had no particular enthusiasm for the trip, he knew Samantha enjoyed the glitz and glamour. He had planned to surprise her with something special, a piece of jewelry, perhaps. It was the least he could do for the woman who had stood by his side through all of it, even if things between them weren't as warm as they used to be. Michael glanced back at Emily's room one last time before shutting the door softly. He would always carry her memory, the pain of her loss woven into every fiber of his being. But life had a way of moving on, even when you weren't ready. He made his way downstairs, where Samantha was already waiting by the door. She looked as radiant as ever, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Ready to go?" she asked with a smile, though Michael noticed the faintest edge of impatience in her voice. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, let's go." They drove in silence for the first half of the trip. Samantha made small talk about a dinner party they were supposed to attend later in the week, but Michael's mind was elsewhere. He was back in that room, standing over Emily's bed, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. When they finally arrived in the city, Samantha's excitement was palpable. She loved New York, the bustling streets, the high-end shops, the sense of endless possibility. Michael, on the other hand, had always found it overwhelming, but today wasn't about him. He had one goal: Find the perfect gift for Samantha. As they walked down Fifth Avenue, Samantha flitted in and out of shops, trying on designer dresses and shoes. Michael followed along, his thoughts still lingering on Emily. His eyes scanned the crowds absent-mindedly, as if he might catch a glimpse of her in the sea of faces, even though he knew it was impossible. After what felt like hours, they finally stopped in front of a jewelry store. "I think I'll go in here," Samantha said, her eyes gleaming as she peered through the window at the sparkling gems inside. Michael nodded, following her inside. It was a high-end store, with polished counters and plush carpeting, the kind of place where a single necklace could cost as much as a car. Michael wasn't one for extravagance, but Samantha loved it, and that was what mattered. As he stepped inside, something caught his eye, something he hadn't expected. It was a young woman behind the counter, a sales associate helping another customer. Around her neck hung a small, delicate pendant. Michael's heart skipped a beat. It was the exact same pendant he had given to Emily all those years ago. Michael's world slowed to a crawl. His eyes were locked on the small pendant around the young saleswoman's neck. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The pendant, with its delicate chain and the tiny emerald stone set in the center, was identical to the one he had given to Emily just days before she vanished. He could still remember how her face had lit up when he had placed it around her neck, her small hands reaching up to touch the cool metal, a bright smile stretching across her face. "Michael?" Samantha's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was standing next to him, eyeing a set of diamond earrings. What do you think of these?" He barely registered her words. Sure. They're nice," he muttered, his gaze still fixed on the saleswoman. His heart raced as his mind tried to piece together what he was seeing. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? There had to be thousands of pendants like that out there. Still, something about the way it shimmered in the soft store light brought a wave of emotions crashing over him. "I'll be right back," Michael mumbled, already walking toward the counter. He could hear Samantha call after him, but the sound faded as he approached the young woman. As she finished helping another customer, Michael stood waiting, his throat dry, his palms sweating. Up close, he could see her face more clearly. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't quite place it. Was it her eyes? Her jawline? His thoughts raced with a dizzying mix of hope and fear. Finally, she turned to him, a professional smile on her face. "Can I help you, sir?" Her voice was calm, polite, but there was a warmth to it that caught him off guard. Michael hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to start. His eyes flicked to the pendant again. "That necklace," he said, his voice a bit shaky. "Where did you get it?" The saleswoman looked down at the pendant as if noticing it for the first time. Her hand instinctively went to it, fingers brushing over the emerald. "Oh, it was a gift from my mother." Michael's breath caught. "Your mother?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She nodded. "Yeah, it's one of the only things I have from her. She gave it to me when I was little. Why do you ask?" Michael's pulse pounded in his ears. He opened his mouth to respond, but his words faltered. How could he explain? How could he even ask the questions forming in his mind without sounding insane? He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. I used to know someone who had a necklace just like that," he finally said, carefully choosing his words. "It's very rare." The young woman smiled softly, though there was a flicker of something, confusion, maybe, in her eyes. "Yeah, I've never seen another one like it. My mom always said it was special. It's the only piece of jewelry I wear." Michael felt his chest tighten. He had to know more, but he couldn't just come out and ask if she was Emily. If this woman, standing in front of him after all these years, could possibly be his daughter. He needed answers, but he had to tread carefully. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though his heart was pounding. "Lily," she replied. "Lily Matthews." Lily, not Emily. Michael swallowed hard, the initial wave of hope dampened by the reality of her name. But names could be changed. The thought lingered, growing stronger by the second. Lily Matthews, he repeated quietly. It's a beautiful name. He forced a smile, his mind working in overdrive. Who was this woman, and why did she have Emily's necklace? He needed to know more. He needed to dig deeper. Before he could ask another question, Samantha appeared at his side, her eyes moving between him and Lily with a curious expression. "Michael, what are you doing?" she asked, a slight edge to her voice. "Did you find something you like?" Michael blinked, momentarily thrown off. No, not yet," he stammered, still trying to focus on Lily. "I was just talking to the young lady about her necklace." Samantha gave a small laugh, clearly confused by his sudden interest in the jewelry. "You're really getting into this, aren't you?" She turned to Lily, offering her a polite smile. "He's not usually the jewelry type." Lily returned the smile, but Michael could sense her growing unease. The moment was slipping away, and he still didn't have the answers he needed. "Do you work here every day?" Michael asked, his voice slightly strained, as if clinging to a lifeline. "I mean, in case I want to come back. You know, for the necklace." Lily looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly. Yeah, I'm here most days," she said slowly, her gaze flicking between him and Samantha. There was something cautious in her expression now, as if she could sense the weight behind his words, though she didn't understand it. Michael nodded, forcing himself to step back. He couldn't push too hard, not yet, but he had to know more. "We'll be back," he said, more to himself than anyone else. He barely registered Samantha's amused expression as they left the store, his mind still reeling from the encounter. The pendant. Lily. There was no way this was a coincidence. As they walked back down the street, Samantha continued to chat about the earrings she wanted, but Michael was miles away. His mind was racing with possibilities, each one more wild and far-fetched than the last. Could it be her? Could this young woman be the daughter he had lost all those years ago? The thought consumed him, pulling him deeper into a whirlwind of emotions: hope, fear, disbelief. He needed to know more about Lily Matthews. He needed to know if she was truly Emily, and he wasn't going to stop until he had the answers. Michael's mind raced as they drove home from the city. Samantha was talking, her voice floating in the background, but he barely heard a word. His thoughts were consumed by the image of Lily in the jewelry store, the way her fingers had instinctively touched the pendant, the same pendant he had given to Emily. Could it really be her? Could his daughter, who had vanished nearly 2 decades ago, have been standing right in front of him? By the time they pulled into the driveway, Michael had made up his mind. He wasn't going to let this rest. The answers were too close. He could feel it. He needed to know who Lily really was, and why she had Emily's necklace. Later that evening, after Samantha had gone to bed, Michael sat in his office, staring at the family photos that lined his desk. There were pictures of him and Elizabeth, smiling on their wedding day, their arms wrapped around each other. There was Emily, in one of her last school photos, grinning with 2 missing teeth. His eyes lingered on her face, the same hopeful, innocent expression she always had. He had spent years searching for her. At first, the police had been optimistic. They thought she'd been taken by someone close by, that a neighbor or a family friend might have known something. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the trail went cold. After a year, the authorities had all but given up. But Michael never did. He had hired private investigators, spent a fortune on the search, but nothing had come of it. Emily was gone, and with her, part of Michael's soul. Now, there was hope. And with that hope came the need for action. Michael picked up the phone and called an old contact, Paul Mitchell, a private investigator he had worked with in the past. Paul had a reputation for being discreet, thorough, and relentless. If anyone could dig up information on Lily Matthews, it was him. The phone rang twice before Paul answered, his voice low and gravelly. "Michael Reynolds, it's been a long time." "Too long," Michael replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need your help again, Paul. It's about Emily." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I thought we'd exhausted every lead." "I found something. Someone," Michael said, his words rushing out. "A young woman. She has the same pendant I gave Emily before she disappeared. I think she might be my daughter." Paul was silent for a moment, then his voice softened. "I'll need more than a pendant, Michael. People move on. Jewelry gets passed around. You know that." "I know," Michael said quickly. "But it's not just that. She looks familiar. There's something about her, Paul. I can't explain it. I need you to look into her. Find out who she is, where she came from." Paul sighed. "Send me the details. I'll see what I can do." Michael hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, his heart racing. He had done all he could for now. It was up to Paul to find out the truth. The next few days passed in a blur. Michael tried to focus on his work, on the daily responsibilities of running his business, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Lily. Every time the phone rang, his pulse quickened, hoping it was Paul with news. Samantha noticed his distraction, of course. She was no fool. But Michael was careful not to reveal too much. He wasn't ready to tell her about Lily. Not yet. Finally, a week after their visit to the jewelry store, Paul called. "I've got something," he said, his tone serious. Michael felt his stomach tighten. "What did you find?" "Lily Matthews," Paul began, "isn't who she thinks she is. According to the records I pulled, she was found abandoned as a child, about 7 years old, just outside of a small town upstate. No one knew where she came from, and there were no missing persons reports filed in the area that matched her description. The couple who found her ended up adopting her. They gave her a new name and raised her as their own." Michael's breath caught in his throat. 7 years old? That's right. She didn't have any memory of her life before they found her. And there's more. I found a photo of her when she was first found. Michael, it's her. It's Emily. Michael felt the world tilt on its axis. He gripped the edge of his desk, trying to steady himself. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," Paul confirmed. "The pendant, her age, the timeline, it all lines up. I'm sending you the photo now." Michael's phone buzzed, and he opened the message. His heart stopped as he stared at the image. It was Emily. Her hair was shorter, and she looked thinner, more fragile. But it was her. There was no doubt in his mind. Tears welled up in his eyes as he sat back, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him. After all these years, after all the searching, Emily had been alive, hidden in plain sight, raised by another family, with no memory of the life she had lost. But as the initial wave of emotion passed, a new question took its place. How had this happened? How had Emily ended up alone, abandoned on a roadside with no memory of her past? And, more importantly, why hadn't he been able to find her? Michael wiped his eyes and sat forward, his mind racing. There were still too many unanswered questions. And one of those questions, the one that gnawed at him the most, was about Samantha. Could she have known? Could she have been involved somehow? It seemed impossible. Samantha had been his rock after Emily's disappearance. She had been supportive, kind, always urging him not to give up hope. But now, with this new information, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, more that he didn't understand. He had to confront her. He had to know the truth. Michael sat at his desk, staring at the photo of Emily that Paul had sent him. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to absorb the reality of what he was seeing. 18 years of searching, hoping, and now, finally, the truth was in front of him. Emily was alive. But how had she ended up in that small town, abandoned, with no memory of her life before? And why had no one found her until now? His thoughts drifted back to Samantha. Over the years, she had always been there, by his side, comforting him when the grief became too much to bear. But there had always been something, a nagging feeling in the back of his mind that something wasn't quite right. Now, with this discovery, that feeling was stronger than ever. Michael stood up abruptly, pacing the room as he tried to piece it all together. He had trusted Samantha with his life, his heart. Could she really have been involved in something as sinister as Emily's disappearance? The thought made his stomach churn, but he couldn't ignore it any longer. Taking a deep breath, Michael made his decision. He needed to talk to Samantha. He needed to confront her, to hear the truth from her own lips. He couldn't live in this uncertainty any longer. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Michael could barely keep his composure. Samantha chatted away about the day's events, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. He waited for the right moment, his heart pounding with the weight of what he was about to do. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he put down his fork and looked at her. "Samantha, we need to talk." Samantha glanced up, her expression shifting from cheerful to curious. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Michael took a deep breath, steadying himself. "It's about Emily." The color drained from Samantha's face, but she quickly masked her reaction with a calm smile. "Michael, we've been through this. We've done everything we could. You need to let it go." "I found her," Michael said, his voice firm. "She's alive, Samantha. I saw her." Samantha froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then, she let out a shaky laugh, though it was clear she was struggling to maintain her composure. "Michael, that's impossible. You've been searching for years. How could you possibly—" "I saw her," Michael repeated, his voice rising slightly. "I spoke to her. She's working in a jewelry store in New York. Her name is Lily now, but it's her. Samantha. It's Emily." Samantha's face paled, and she set down her glass of wine, her hand trembling. "You're mistaken," she whispered. "It can't be her." "It is," Michael insisted, standing up from the table. "And you knew, didn't you? You knew all along." Samantha's eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You orchestrated her disappearance," Michael said, his voice cold and steady. "You sent her away. You didn't want her here. You wanted me and my fortune all to yourself." Samantha's face crumpled, her facade finally breaking. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far." Michael felt the air leave his lungs. The truth was out, but it didn't bring the relief he had expected. Instead, it crushed him. He had loved this woman, trusted her, and she had betrayed him in the worst possible way. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. "Why would you do this to me? To her?" Samantha's lip quivered as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was jealous," she admitted, her voice shaking. I thought if she was gone, you would focus on me, on us. I was afraid that you would never love me the way you loved Elizabeth and Emily. I wanted you all to myself, Michael. I wanted us to have a life without the shadow of your past hanging over us." Michael stared at her in disbelief. "You destroyed my life," he said, his voice trembling. "You took my daughter away from me. Do you even understand what you've done?" Samantha sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry. I thought it would be better this way. I thought you would be happier without her. I didn't realize how much it would hurt you." Michael's hands clenched into fists at his sides as he fought to control his anger. "You had no right," he said, his voice cold and hard. no right to make that decision for me. You took my daughter's life away, and you took my chance to be her father. How could you?" Samantha looked up at him, her tear-streaked face filled with desperation. "Michael, please," she begged. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can still be a family. We can—" "No," Michael said sharply, cutting her off. "There's no fixing this. You've ruined everything. I will never forgive you for what you've done." Samantha's face crumpled again, and she sank back into her chair, defeated. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. But Michael wasn't listening anymore. He turned and walked out of the dining room, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't be in the same room as her for another second. The woman he had trusted with his heart, with his life, had destroyed everything. Michael stepped outside, the cool night air hitting his face as he leaned against the side of the house. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, grief, disbelief. He had finally found Emily, but the truth had come at a price he wasn't sure he could bear. Samantha had taken everything from him, but now, at least, he had Emily. And he wasn't going to let anything or anyone take her away from him again. Michael spent the rest of the night in a fog of anger and disbelief. He replayed the conversation with Samantha over and over in his mind, trying to make sense of the madness. His heart felt like it had been shattered all over again, first by the loss of his daughter, and now by the betrayal of the woman he thought he could trust. He hardly slept, pacing the house in the dead of night, lost in a swirl of emotions. By dawn, one thing was clear. He had to see Emily. He needed to talk to her, to explain everything, to finally tell her the truth. But how could he tell her? How could he break the news that her entire life, her identity, had been built on lies? He had no idea how she would react, but he knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had to go to her. Michael showered and dressed quickly, his mind racing with thoughts of what he would say. As he headed toward the door, Samantha appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Michael," she called softly, her voice fragile. "Please, let's talk. I was wrong. I'll fix this. I promise. Please, don't do this." Michael didn't even look up at her. He couldn't. The sight of her made his stomach turn. "There's nothing left to say, Samantha," he said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. "You've done enough damage." Without waiting for a response, he stepped out the door and into his car. He couldn't bear another second in that house. The drive to the jewelry store felt like a blur. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with tension. What if Emily didn't believe him? What if she thought he was crazy? Or worse, what if she wanted nothing to do with him? The thought sent a jolt of fear through him, but he pushed it down. He had to try. He owed her the truth. When he arrived at the store, Michael sat in the car for a moment, gathering his thoughts. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for all these years. He took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the store was quiet, and there she was, Lily, or rather Emily, behind the counter, organizing jewelry displays. The sight of her made Michael's heart clench. She looked so much like Elizabeth, with the same soft features, the same determined expression. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he didn't know how to move. Finally, he found his voice. "Lily." She looked up, surprised to see him again so soon. "Oh, hi," she said with a polite smile. "Did you need something else?" Michael swallowed hard, his pulse racing. This was it. There was no going back now. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's about who you are." Lily blinked, clearly confused. "Who I am?" "Yes," Michael said, stepping closer to the counter. He could see the confusion in her eyes, and it pained him to know what he was about to tell her. "Lily, or rather, Emily, I believe you're my daughter." Lily's polite smile faltered, replaced by a frown. She stared at him, as if waiting for him to say it was a joke. But when the silence stretched on, her expression hardened. "Excuse me." Michael's throat tightened. He knew it sounded insane, but he had to make her understand. "I believe you're Emily Reynolds, my daughter. You disappeared when you were 7 years old. I've been looking for you ever since." Lily's face went pale. She took a step back, her hands gripping the counter behind her. "I think you've made a mistake," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I'm not Emily. My name is Lily Matthews. I don't know what you're talking about." Michael's heart sank, but he pressed on. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I have proof. The necklace, the pendant you're wearing, it's the same one I gave to my daughter before she disappeared. I've spent years searching for her, for you." Lily's eyes widened, and she instinctively touched the pendant around her neck. This was a gift from my mother," she said, her voice trembling. "My adopted mother." Michael took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I know. Your adopted parents found you when you were 7, just outside of a small town. You had no memory of where you came from, no memory of your past. They gave you a new name. But you're Emily. I'm your father." Lily stared at him, her breath coming in short, quick bursts. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That can't be true. You don't even know me." "I do," Michael said, his voice breaking. "I've been searching for you for 18 years. I never gave up. I hired investigators, spent everything I had trying to find you. And now I have. I know it's hard to believe, but I swear to you, Lily, Emily, you're my daughter." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she took another step back, as if trying to put distance between them. "I don't understand," she whispered. I don't remember anything." Michael's heart broke at the sight of her distress, but he couldn't stop now. "It's not your fault," he said gently. "You were taken from me. You were too young to remember. But I'm telling you the truth. You are Emily Reynolds." Lily's hands trembled as she gripped the pendant tightly, her mind spinning. If this is true," she whispered, barely able to form the words, "then why didn't you find me sooner? Why did it take this long?" Michael's chest tightened. How could he explain the years of searching, the dead ends, the hopelessness that had consumed him for so long? "I tried," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I did everything I could. But someone made sure you were hidden. Made sure I couldn't find you." Lily's tear-filled eyes met his, confusion and fear clouding her expression. "Who?" Michael hesitated, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "Samantha," he said quietly. "Your stepmother. She was the one who sent you away." Lily stared at him, frozen in disbelief. "What?" "She did it out of jealousy," Michael continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She didn't want you to be part of our lives. She wanted me all to herself, so she made you disappear." Lily shook her head, her tears spilling over. No, that can't be true. My mother would never." "I know it's hard to hear," Michael said softly, reaching out to her. "But it's the truth. And I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry for everything." Lily backed away, her hands trembling as she clutched the pendant. Her mind was reeling, her world unraveling. I need to go," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Emily, wait." Michael reached out, but she turned and rushed out of the store, leaving him standing there, devastated. Lily rushed down the busy street, her mind spinning, her heart racing. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she needed to get away. The words Michael had said kept echoing in her head. "You're my daughter, Emily Reynolds." It didn't make sense. Her entire life, she had been Lily Matthews, the adopted daughter of a loving couple who had saved her from a past she couldn't remember. And now this man, this stranger, was telling her that everything she knew was a lie. She could still feel the pendant against her chest, the one she had worn for as long as she could remember. Her adopted mother had given it to her, telling her it was a special piece from her childhood. Lily had never questioned it. Why would she? She had always assumed her past was a mystery she would never solve. But now she wasn't so sure. After what felt like hours of wandering aimlessly, Lily found herself sitting on a bench in a quiet park. Her mind was a chaotic mess, filled with questions she had no answers to. She touched the pendant again, running her fingers over the smooth surface, as if it held the key to her past. Could what Michael said really be true? Could she be Emily Reynolds, the daughter of a man she didn't remember? Her thoughts drifted back to her adopted parents, the ones who had taken her in when she was just a child. They had always been kind and loving, never pressuring her to remember anything from before they found her. In fact, they had been cautious about discussing her past at all. They told her only what little they knew, that she had been found wandering outside a small town, alone and confused, with no memory of who she was or where she had come from. Lily had accepted that story for years. She had made peace with the idea that her early childhood was lost to her, buried in some part of her mind she could never reach. But now, that peace was shattered. If what Michael said was true, then her life, her very identity, had been stolen from her. And the person responsible was the woman who had been her stepmother, a woman she didn't even remember. The thought made her stomach churn. How could someone be so cruel? How could anyone take a child away from their family, from the father who had been searching for her all these years? Lily didn't want to believe it, but the more she thought about it, the more things started to make sense. There had always been a part of her that felt disconnected, as if something was missing, a piece of herself she couldn't quite grasp. She let out a shaky breath and pulled out her phone. She needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to her. Lily stood on the doorstep of her parents' house, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't been here in weeks, not since she had moved out to live on her own. But now, standing in front of the familiar door, the place that had always felt like home, she felt a surge of uncertainty. What if they hadn't told her the whole truth? What if there was more to her past than they had let on? The door opened, and her mother, Anne Matthews, stood there, smiling warmly as always. "Lily," she exclaimed, wrapping her in a tight hug. "It's so good to see you, honey. We've missed you." Lily hugged her back, but her mind was elsewhere. She pulled away, trying to muster the courage to ask the questions that had been burning inside her all day. "Mom, can we talk?" Anne's smile faded slightly, her brow furrowing with concern. "Of course, sweetie. Is everything all right?" Lily nodded, though she didn't feel all right at all. "Yeah, I need to ask you something. It's about where I came from, before you and Dad adopted me." Anne's face paled, and Lily could see the hesitation in her eyes. "Why are you asking about that now?" she asked softly, leading Lily into the living room. "I thought we had settled all that years ago." "I know, Mom," Lily said quickly, sitting down on the couch, "but something happened today. Someone told me something, and now I don't know what to think." Anne sat down beside her, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "What did they tell you?" Lily took a deep breath, her fingers instinctively reaching for the pendant again. "A man came to the store today. His name is Michael Reynolds. He says that I'm his daughter, that I'm Emily Reynolds, and that I was taken from him when I was 7. Anne's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Lily watched her carefully, waiting for her to deny it, to tell her that it was all a mistake. But Anne didn't speak. She just sat there, her face drained of color, her hands trembling slightly. "Mom?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. Is it true?" Anne's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, unable to meet Lily's gaze. "Oh, Lily," she whispered, I didn't think you would ever find out." Lily's heart sank. "So it is true." Anne nodded slowly, her voice trembling as she spoke. "We didn't know who you were when we found you. You were just a little girl, all alone, wandering by the side of the road. You didn't remember anything, your name, where you came from, nothing. We took you in, and we loved you as our own. But we always knew there was a chance that your real family might come looking for you." Lily's chest tightened as the weight of her mother's words settled over her. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" Anne wiped at her tears, her face filled with guilt. "We didn't want to scare you. You were so young, and we thought it would be better if you didn't remember. We didn't know who your parents were or if they would ever come back. We just wanted you to feel safe." Lily stood up, her emotions boiling over. "But I had a family," she cried, her voice breaking. "I had a father who's been searching for me all these years, and you never told me." Anne stood as well, reaching out to her. "Lily, please." "I'm not Lily," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I'm Emily. My name is Emily Reynolds, and you've been lying to me my whole life." Anne's face crumpled, and she sank back onto the couch, sobbing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. We never meant to hurt you. We just wanted to give you a home." Lily wiped at her tears, her heart aching with a mix of anger, confusion, and sadness. She had always loved her adopted parents. They had given her a good life, a safe life. But now, everything she thought she knew about herself, about her past, had been shattered. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the house, her mind racing with the revelation that her life had been built on a foundation of lies. Michael sat in his office, staring at the photograph of Emily that Paul had sent him just days before. His heart ached as he thought about the whirlwind of emotions that had unfolded. Emily, his daughter, was alive, but now he had torn her world apart with the truth. He had been so eager to reunite with her, but in the process, he had shattered the life she thought she knew. But there was something else that gnawed at him. The betrayal, Samantha's betrayal. It ate at him, a festering wound that refused to heal. She had orchestrated Emily's disappearance, and now that the truth was out, he had to confront her once more. He couldn't wait any longer. He needed to hear Samantha admit everything. This time, he wouldn't let her deflect or play innocent. He would get the full truth out of her. Taking a deep breath, Michael stood and walked down the hallway, his footsteps heavy as he approached the master bedroom. He found Samantha sitting at the vanity, brushing her hair absent-mindedly. She glanced up at him through the mirror as he entered, her expression unreadable. "Michael," she said softly, her voice careful. "What's wrong?" He closed the door behind him and stood by the foot of the bed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "We need to talk." Samantha turned to face him, setting down her hairbrush. "What about?" she asked, though there was a hint of wariness in her tone. "You know exactly what about," Michael said, his voice low and dangerous. "Emily." Samantha's face paled slightly, but she held his gaze. "I already told you. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought it was what you needed, what we needed." Michael's jaw tightened. "What we needed? You're telling me you thought tearing my daughter away from me was for my own good? For our good?" Samantha's eyes filled with tears, and she stood up, walking toward him. "Michael, please. I never wanted to hurt you." "You didn't want to hurt me?" Michael's voice rose, his anger bubbling to the surface. "You tore my life apart. You took away the one thing that mattered to me more than anything in this world. And you think saying you didn't mean to hurt me makes it better." Samantha flinched but didn't back down. "I was desperate," she said, her voice shaking. I thought if she was gone, we could have a fresh start. You could finally move on. We could finally be a real family without you constantly looking for a ghost." "A ghost?" Michael's voice was cold. "She was my daughter, Samantha, not a ghost. She was my flesh and blood, and you took her from me. For what? Because you were jealous." Tears streamed down Samantha's face as she shook her head. "I was scared," she whispered. "I was afraid I would never be enough for you. I saw how much you still loved Elizabeth, how much Emily reminded you of her. I thought I was losing you. So I did what I thought I had to do." Michael's chest tightened with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You sent a child away to protect yourself. A child, Samantha. Do you even realize what you've done?" "I do," she sobbed, collapsing onto the bed. "I know I ruined everything. I know I can never undo what I did. But Michael, I love you. I did this because I loved you." Michael stared at her, his heart aching with a deep, bitter sadness. "If you loved me, you never would have taken her away from me. You never would have let me suffer all these years, thinking she was gone forever." Samantha looked up at him, her face wet with tears. "What can I do? How can I make this right?" "You can't," Michael said quietly, his voice hardening. "It's too late for that." The room fell into a heavy silence as Samantha's sobs filled the air. Michael felt no pity, no sympathy for her. He had trusted her, and she had betrayed him in the worst possible way. There was no coming back from this. After a long pause, Michael took a step back toward the door. "I'm filing for divorce," he said flatly. "And you can be sure that I'll make sure everyone knows what you did." Samantha's eyes widened in panic. "No, Michael, please." "It's over, Samantha," he said, his voice cold and final. "You've destroyed everything." With that, Michael turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. The house felt suffocating, filled with the ghosts of his past mistakes and betrayals. He needed to get out, needed air. Michael found himself driving without any clear destination, the city lights blurring past him as he gripped the steering wheel, his thoughts tangled. Everything had fallen apart so quickly. His marriage was over. His relationship with Emily was in pieces, and he was left with the overwhelming weight of everything Samantha had done. But despite all the pain, there was one thing that kept him going: Emily. He had found her, after all these years. She might not remember him yet, but she was still his daughter, and he wasn't going to let her slip away again. Pulling over to the side of the road, Michael took out his phone and dialed Paul's number. The private investigator answered after a few rings, his voice gruff. "Michael." "I need your help," Michael said, his voice steady. "There's still more to this. I need to know why Samantha did what she did, and I need to find out who else was involved." Paul let out a sigh. "You sure you want to keep digging?" "I'm sure," Michael replied. "There's more to this, Paul. I can feel it. Samantha didn't act alone. I need to know everything." "All right," Paul said. "I'll see what I can find." Michael hung up the phone and leaned back in his seat, the weight of the last few days pressing down on him. He had come so far, found Emily, uncovered Samantha's betrayal. But there were still too many unanswered questions, and he wasn't going to stop until he had every single one of them. His mind drifted back to Emily, his daughter, lost and found again. He didn't know how he was going to fix things with her, how he could even begin to repair the damage that had been done. But he would. He had to. Taking a deep breath, Michael started the car and headed back home. He had a long road ahead of him, but he wasn't alone anymore. He had Emily, and no matter what happened next, he was going to fight for her. Michael sat in his office, fingers drumming on the desk as he waited for Paul's call. Every minute felt like an eternity as the unanswered questions gnawed at him. He knew there had to be more to the story. Samantha couldn't have orchestrated something so elaborate on her own. But who else had been involved? And why? He needed closure, not just for himself, but for Emily. The phone buzzed, breaking the silence, and Michael quickly picked it up. "Paul, what did you find?" Paul's voice was steady on the other end of the line. "You were right, Michael. There's more to this than just Samantha." Michael's stomach tightened. He had expected this, but hearing it out loud made the betrayal feel even deeper. "Who else was involved?" "I did some digging into Samantha's background," Paul began. "Turns out she wasn't acting alone. There was someone helping her, someone who had a vested interest in keeping Emily out of the picture." Michael's heart pounded as he waited for Paul to continue. "Samantha was working with a man named David Hale," Paul explained. "He's a lawyer, but he's also been involved in some pretty shady dealings over the years, mostly with people trying to hide assets or manipulate inheritances." Michael's mind raced. David Hale. The name sounded familiar. Why would she work with him? Paul hesitated for a moment. Because she wanted to make sure that Emily never came back to claim what was rightfully hers. From what I've found, Hale helped Samantha set up the whole operation, making sure Emily disappeared and couldn't be traced back to you. Michael felt a surge of anger rising in his chest. Samantha hadn't just taken his daughter away out of jealousy. She had done it to control his fortune, to make sure that Emily wouldn't inherit anything. She had been manipulating him for years, playing on his grief, while working behind the scenes to secure her own position. "Where is Hale now?" Michael asked, his voice tense. "That's the thing," Paul said. "He's been off the radar for a while, but I've got some leads. I'm tracking him down as we speak." Michael clenched his jaw. "I want to talk to him. I want answers." "You'll get them," Paul assured him, "but you need to be careful. This guy's slippery. He knows how to cover his tracks." "I don't care how slippery he is," Michael said, his voice hard. "I'm going to find him, and I'm going to make sure he pays for what he did." After the call ended, Michael sat in silence, his thoughts racing. Samantha's betrayal was deeper than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about jealousy. It was about power, control, and money. She had taken Emily away to protect her own interests, all while pretending to support him through his grief. But now, the truth was coming to light, and Michael wasn't going to rest until everyone involved was held accountable. Meanwhile, Emily sat alone in her small apartment, her mind still reeling from the conversation with her adoptive mother. The words echoed in her head, over and over. "We didn't know who you were when we found you." She had always assumed she would never know where she came from, that her past would remain a mystery. But now, everything had changed. The pendant around her neck felt heavier than ever, like a reminder of a life she didn't remember. She turned it over in her fingers, staring at the tiny emerald stone that had been a constant in her life. Michael's words haunted her. Could she really be Emily Reynolds? Could this man who claimed to be her father be telling the truth? Part of her wanted to believe him. The look in his eyes when he had spoken to her. There had been so much emotion, so much pain. It was clear he believed every word he had said. But how could she trust someone she didn't even know? How could she accept that her entire life had been built on lies? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was her adoptive mother, Anne. Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "Lily." Anne's voice was shaky. "I mean, Emily, I'm so sorry." Emily's throat tightened. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? Why didn't you tell me I had a family out there looking for me?" "I wanted to," Anne said, her voice breaking. "But we didn't know. We didn't know who you really were until that man came to the store. We only knew you as the little girl we found, and we loved you. We didn't want to lose you." Emily closed her eyes, her emotions warring inside her. "But you did lose me," she said quietly. "You lost me the moment you didn't tell me the truth." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Emily knew her words had hit hard. But she couldn't help how she felt. She had spent her entire life feeling like something was missing, and now she knew why. "I'm sorry," Anne whispered again. "I wish we had handled things differently." Emily didn't know what to say. She had loved her adoptive parents, but now, everything felt tainted. She didn't know who she was anymore. She wasn't Lily Matthews. She was Emily Reynolds, the daughter of a man who had been searching for her for 18 years. "I need time to figure this out," Emily said softly. I need time." "I understand," Anne said quietly. "Take all the time you need. We'll always be here for you." Emily hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. She didn't know where to go from here. Her life had been turned upside down, and she wasn't sure how to put the pieces back together. Later that evening, Michael sat in the living room, staring into the fireplace. The house was quiet, but the silence felt heavy. Samantha was gone, her belongings packed and moved out, leaving behind an emptiness that matched the one inside him. The doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone. But when he opened the door, his heart skipped a beat. Emily stood there, her face pale, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Michael felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Relief, hope, fear. He stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. "I'm glad you came," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Emily hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking around as if trying to piece together the fragments of a life she didn't remember. "I don't know what to believe," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I don't know who I am anymore." Michael's heart broke at the sound of her words. He wanted to reach out, to tell her everything would be okay, but he knew this was something she needed to work through on her own. "You're Emily," he said gently. "You're my daughter, and I'll be here for you, no matter what." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, struggling to keep her emotions in check. "I don't remember anything," she whispered. "I don't remember you. I don't remember my life before." Michael stepped closer, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to remember everything right now. We have time. We can figure this out together." For a moment, Emily said nothing, her gaze fixed on the floor. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I don't know where to start." Michael felt a glimmer of hope. "We'll start wherever you want," he said. "We'll take it one step at a time." Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and fear. "What if I never remember?" Michael swallowed hard, his voice steady. "Then we'll build new memories." The days that followed were slow, filled with uncertainty, but also with cautious hope. Emily had moved into a small guest room at Michael's house, though she still kept some distance. It was clear that she was trying to process everything that had been revealed to her, the truth about her past, the lies she had lived, and the father who was now a stranger to her. Michael didn't push. He gave her space, but he made sure she knew that he was there for her. Each morning, they would sit together over breakfast, exchanging small talk about nothing important. It was awkward at first, both of them unsure how to bridge the enormous gap between them. But slowly, day by day, they began to feel a little more comfortable. Michael tried his best to be patient. He knew that for Emily, this wasn't just about reconnecting with him, it was about rediscovering herself. She was grappling with an identity crisis, caught between the life she had known and the truth that had been hidden from her. He could see the struggle in her eyes every time they spoke, the confusion that seemed to weigh her down. One morning, as they sat together at the dining table, Emily finally broke the silence. "Do you ever think about Mom?" she asked, her voice soft and tentative, as if she wasn't sure if it was okay to ask. Michael felt his heart tighten at the mention of Elizabeth. "Every day," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "She was She was the love of my life. Losing her was the hardest thing I've ever been through." Emily nodded, her gaze distant. "I don't remember her. I wish I did." Michael looked at her, his heart aching for all that she had lost. "She was kind," he said gently, "and strong. You remind me of her in so many ways." Emily's eyes filled with unshed tears, and she looked away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's strange," she whispered. "I've always felt like something was missing in my life, like there was this big empty space that I couldn't explain, and now I know why. But it doesn't make it any easier." Michael reached out, placing his hand gently over hers. "I know this is hard," he said softly. "And I don't expect everything to be okay right away. But I'm here. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out together." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty but also with a flicker of hope. "I want to know more," she said quietly. "About you, about her, about our life before." Michael felt a swell of emotion. This was the first real sign that Emily wanted to reconnect, to understand the life she had been torn from. He nodded, his voice steady. "I'll tell you everything." That evening, Michael brought out a box of old family photos, ones that he had kept stored away for years. He and Emily sat on the living room floor, sifting through the pictures together. For Michael, it was like opening a time capsule, so many memories of a life that had been lost to him for nearly 2 decades. "This was our house," Michael said, holding up a photo of a beautiful colonial-style home surrounded by trees. "We lived there before everything happened." Emily studied the picture, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of the past she didn't remember. "It looks familiar," she murmured, though her voice was uncertain. Michael smiled gently. "You used to love playing in the backyard. There was this big oak tree, and you'd spend hours climbing it, even though your mom was always worried you'd fall." Emily's lips twitched into a small smile. "Sounds like something I would do." Michael laughed softly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. This was the first time they had really shared something, a memory, even if it was one that Emily couldn't fully recall. As they continued to look through the photos, Michael told her stories about her childhood, little things, like her favorite toys, the songs she loved to sing, and the way she used to follow him around the house, asking endless questions about how things worked. "Mom sounds amazing," Emily said quietly, her eyes lingering on a photo of Elizabeth holding her as a baby. "I wish I had more time with her." Michael swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "She would have been so proud of you, Emily," he said softly. "She loved you more than anything in the world." Emily looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears. "I want to remember her," she whispered. "I want to remember our life together, but I don't know how." Michael reached out, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to remember everything right now. What matters is that we're here now, together. We can make new memories." Emily gave a small nod, though her expression was still filled with uncertainty. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "But it's hard. I don't know how to just go back to being Emily." "You don't have to be the person you were," Michael said gently. "You're not just the girl you were when you were 7. You've grown up. You've had a life. And I don't expect you to erase any of that. You're still Lily too. But you're also Emily. And whatever that means, we'll figure it out together." Emily looked at him, her eyes softening as she absorbed his words. For the first time since their reunion, she seemed to relax, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." Michael's chest tightened with emotion, and he reached out to take her hand. "I never will," he promised. "I spent 18 years searching for you, and now that I've found you, I'm never letting go." For the rest of the evening, They continued to look through the photos, sharing stories and slowly building a connection that had been lost for so long. It was tentative, fragile, but it was there. And for the first time in years, Michael felt a sense of hope, a sense that maybe they could find their way back to each other. Over the next few weeks, Michael and Emily fell into a new routine. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, moments when the weight of the past hung heavy between them. But there were also moments of connection, of shared laughter, of quiet understanding. Michael made a point to show Emily the places that had once been important to them: old family spots, her childhood home, and even the park where they used to play. Each visit brought new layers to their relationship, slowly bridging the gap between the past and the present. One afternoon, they visited the small cemetery where Elizabeth was buried. It was a quiet, serene place, shaded by tall trees. Michael knelt by the gravestone, running his fingers over the engraved name. "She would have loved to see you again," he said softly. Emily stood beside him, her eyes filled with sadness as she looked down at the grave. "I wish I could remember her," she whispered. "You don't need to remember everything to know that she loved you," Michael said gently. "Her love for you was always there, and it's still here now." Emily nodded, and for a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the past and present mingling in the air. In the weeks following their visit to the cemetery, Emily and Michael continued to build their relationship, layer by layer, memory by memory. There were still moments of tension, moments when Emily's confusion about her past threatened to overwhelm her. But she was trying, really trying, to let herself believe that this was her new reality, that Michael was truly her father, and that the life she had been living before wasn't the full picture of who she was. Michael, on the other hand, felt both relief and guilt. He had found his daughter, the one he had spent years searching for, but the pain of all that had been lost, so many years, so many memories they could never get back, haunted him. He had to remind himself to be patient, to give Emily the space she needed to come to terms with everything. But it wasn't easy. Every time he looked at her, he felt a pang of grief for the time they had missed together. One evening, they sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows across the room. Emily was quiet, turning the pendant around in her fingers, a habit she had developed when she was deep in thought. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael looked up, his heart heavy. "It's natural," he said gently. "She's a part of who you are, even if you don't remember everything." Emily nodded slowly. "I wish I had more memories of her. I wish I could remember her voice, her laugh, anything." Michael leaned back in his chair, staring into the flickering flames. "You were so young when she passed. I don't think anyone expects you to remember everything, but I can tell you about her, if you want." Emily hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." Michael took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. Elizabeth was incredible, strong, kind, patient. She loved you more than anything in the world. When we found out she was pregnant with you, it was the happiest moment of our lives. We had been trying for years, and you were our miracle. Emily smiled faintly, her eyes softening. "She sounds amazing." "She was," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "And she would have been so proud of you, of the woman you've become." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of Michael's words lingering in the air. Emily glanced at him, her brow furrowed slightly. What was it like, after she died? Michael swallowed hard, the familiar ache of loss settling in his chest. "It was devastating. I felt like my world had fallen apart. I didn't know how to go on without her, but I had you. You were my reason to keep going." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she listened to him. and then I disappeared." Michael's heart ached at the sadness in her voice. "Yes, and when you were gone, it was like I had lost everything. I spent years searching for you, hoping, praying that one day I'd find you." Emily wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry." Michael frowned, his heart breaking for her. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Emily. None of this is your fault." "I know," she whispered. "But I feel like I've missed so much. I've missed you. I've missed Mom. I've missed my whole life." Michael reached out, gently taking her hand. "We can't change the past, but we have the future. We can make new memories." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if I can't ever fully remember who I was?" Michael squeezed her hand. "Then we'll focus on who you are now. You don't have to be the girl you were. You're Emily, but you're also Lily, and that's okay." Emily nodded, her tears spilling over. "I just wish I knew how to move forward, how to be both." Michael's chest tightened. He wanted to take away her pain, to make everything right again, but he knew this was something she had to work through on her own. "It'll take time," he said softly. "But you'll get there. And I'll be with you every step of the way." The next day, Michael received a call from Paul. His voice was urgent, cutting through the quiet of Michael's office like a knife. "Michael, we've got him." Michael's heart raced. "Hale?" "Yeah, we've located him," Paul confirmed. "He's been hiding out in Miami, using a fake identity, but we've got enough evidence to bring him in." Michael felt a surge of anger rise within him. David Hale, the man who had helped Samantha orchestrate the disappearance of his daughter, the man who had played a part in ripping his family apart. Now, he was finally within reach. "What's the next step?" Michael asked, his voice tight. "I've already contacted the authorities," Paul said. "They're going to arrest him. After that, we'll get the chance to talk to him, to find out everything." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "I want to be there." "You will be," Paul assured him. "This is your chance to get closure, Michael. We're almost there." After the call ended, Michael sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He had been searching for answers for so long. Now, they were finally within his grasp. But as the reality of it set in, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered in his chest. What would Hale say? What more could be uncovered about the conspiracy that had torn his family apart? And what would this final revelation mean for Emily? A few days later, Michael and Paul met with law enforcement in Miami. The air was thick with tension as they waited for the arrest to go down. Michael's heart pounded as he stood outside the small, run-down motel where Hale had been hiding. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. Minutes later, they saw movement. Police officers moved in, and within moments, David Hale was in custody. Michael's eyes locked on the man who had helped Samantha destroy his life. Hale looked older, more disheveled than Michael remembered, but there was still something cold and calculating in his eyes. As Hale was led toward the police car, his eyes met Michael's. There was a flicker of recognition, but no remorse. Michael's stomach turned as he realized that this man had never cared about the consequences of his actions. It had always been about money, power, and control. Paul approached Michael, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get our chance to talk to him. We'll get the answers we need." Michael nodded, though his heart felt heavy. He wasn't sure what he would say when they finally confronted Hale, but one thing was certain. He needed the truth, and he wouldn't rest until he had it. That evening, back at the house, Michael found Emily sitting on the porch, staring out at the fading sunset. She looked so small, so fragile in that moment, and Michael felt a deep sense of protectiveness wash over him. He sat down beside her, the cool evening breeze ruffling his hair. "I have news," he said quietly. Emily looked at him, her brow furrowed. "What is it?" "They found David Hale, the man who helped Samantha. He's been arrested." Emily's face paled, and she looked away, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "What happens now?" "We'll get to question him," Michael said softly. "We'll finally get the full truth." Emily was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you think knowing the full truth will make it any easier?" Michael sighed, unsure of how to answer. "I don't know, but I think we need to know." Emily nodded, though she didn't look convinced. "I'm scared of what else we'll find out." Michael reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No matter what we find out, we'll face it together." Emily gave a small nod, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I just hope it's finally over." Michael sat in the dimly lit interrogation room, his heart pounding in his chest as he waited for David Hale to be brought in. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment where everything would finally be laid bare. Across from him sat Paul, who had been instrumental in bringing Hale out of hiding. Michael glanced at him, grateful for his unwavering support, but his mind was elsewhere. The door opened, and 2 officers escorted Hale into the room. He looked smaller than Michael had imagined, disheveled and tired. But there was still an arrogance in his eyes, as if he believed he could talk his way out of whatever trouble he had found himself in. Hale sat down across from Michael, the tension in the room thickening. Michael leaned forward, his eyes locked on Hale's. "You know why I'm here?" Hale raised an eyebrow, a smirk forming on his lips. "I assume it's about your daughter. But honestly, I was just a facilitator. The mastermind was your wife." "Samantha may have started this," Michael said, his voice steady but filled with barely restrained anger. "But you helped her. You're just as responsible for what happened to Emily. I want to know everything. Why you did it. How you kept it hidden for so long." Hale leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "It was business at Reynolds. Samantha wanted your daughter out of the picture because she was a threat to her influence over you, and more importantly, to the inheritance." Michael's jaw tightened, his fists clenching under the table. "So you helped her disappear my daughter, my 7-year-old daughter, so Samantha could have control over me, over my money." Hale shrugged as if it were the simplest explanation in the world. "It wasn't just about money. It was about ensuring that Samantha stayed in control. She knew you'd never fully let go of Emily or Elizabeth's memory, and she couldn't stand that. So, she made a deal with me. I had the connections to make sure Emily disappeared without a trace." Michael's heart pounded in his chest, anger boiling beneath the surface. He had known the broad strokes of what had happened, but hearing it so coldly laid out in front of him, Emily being treated like a pawn in Samantha's twisted game, made it all feel even more monstrous. "And you never thought about the consequences." Michael's voice shook with rage. "The damage you caused." Hale gave him a hard, emotionless look. "I was paid to do a job. I did it. What happened after that wasn't my problem." Michael slammed his fist onto the table, causing Hale to flinch. "She's my daughter," he roared. "You stole her life, her memories, her identity. You took everything from her, and from me. You destroyed my family." Hale remained calm, though there was a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. "I won't deny that. But you have your daughter back now, don't you?" "You found her." Michael stared at him, his chest heaving with anger. 18 years, he said through gritted teeth. 18 years of not knowing where she was. 18 years of pain, of losing her childhood. You can't fix that. Nothing can fix that. Hale's smirk faded, and he looked away, finally sensing the gravity of what he had done. But Michael wasn't finished. "You're going to prison," Michael said coldly. "For a long time, and I'll make sure you pay for every single day that I spent searching for my daughter." Hale didn't respond. He simply stared at the table, his confidence finally eroding as the reality of his situation set in. Paul placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "That's enough," he said softly. "We've got what we need." Michael stood up, his eyes never leaving Hale's. "You ruined my life," he said quietly. "But I'm going to make sure you never ruin anyone else's." With that, Michael turned and walked out of the room, his heart pounding with adrenaline and fury. He had the answers he had been searching for, but they didn't bring the peace he had hoped for. Instead, they only deepened the sense of loss, the realization that no matter what, the years he had lost with Emily were gone forever. Back at the house, Michael found Emily sitting in the garden, her face bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. She looked peaceful, yet there was a weight in her expression that mirrored his own. He sat down beside her, the silence between them comfortable, yet charged with unspoken thoughts. "I heard you went to see him," Emily said quietly, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the pendant around her neck. Michael nodded, his voice heavy. "I needed to hear it from him. I needed to know why." Emily didn't say anything for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Did it help, knowing the full truth? Michael sighed, leaning back against the bench. "I don't know. In some ways, yes, but it doesn't make anything easier. It doesn't change what happened." Emily nodded, her eyes distant.